afternoon, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank you for the privilege of being here today. ATKINS is obviously delighted to have won the Rail Baltica infrastructure management study. Now, the purpose of the study is to provide basically a comprehensive and independent analysis of all the different options for future infrastructure management, as Casper's alluded to, with the objective of aiding and promoting a really well-informed and substantiated future political decision-making process with regards to the different options. Now, our primary aim is obviously to review and comprehensively analyse all the different infrastructure models that are out there to start with, in order to identify the optimum one for Rail Baltica, from basically a project life cycle, from perspective, from looking at the economic, efficient and market functioning perspectives. And what we are trying to do really is look at all these, but bearing in mind the very unique nature of the Rail Baltica project, and use this to provide options for the end operating company. Now, I could go through the very detailed methodology that we're going to be going through, but I suspect you'll all fall asleep. So what I'd rather do is give you a little bit of a flavour of how we're going to intend to develop the shortlist for either the operating company or the operating companies, and really let you understand what our thinking is in this area, because hopefully today is about us starting a dialogue. So, for apologies with those who've got a very bad sense of humour, basically one thing is for sure, and that's been brought over in abundance today, is that whatever the end shape of the infrastructure management organisation, it must really stand out as a very effective embodiment of the single European railway area. So the fourth railway package is coming. It's spent 5 years in development, and it has a number of core aims that we really must try and embody. I'm not going to go into detail, largely because there's far brighter people here than I am, but the key thing is that there have to be common standards that work. The market has to be genuinely simple for new or existing operators. We have to have really clear separation of infrastructure management from the train operating companies. And we have to get to a position where we build and develop a skilled rail workforce in the region. But amongst the pages and pages of legislation that exists around the fourth railway package, and really, to be honest, define the rail industry, there is flexibility to do something that suits individual projects and suits Rail Baltica. And this is the balance that I think that we want to try and draw out in the study. So we're obviously going to be addressing the requirements of the tender through a very impartial process that is going to be very data-driven. So there's going to be benchmarking, we're going to have clear assessments, there's going to be a lot of work understanding the stakeholder involvement, the voice of the customer and the supply chain, and those who are going to build and maintain this, because having worked in an infrastructure company for many years, you get a very different perspective when you're out talking to the individuals who are walking along a railway track at 2 o'clock in the morning in the wet and the cold about how they want something to operate, versus sitting back, as I've done myself, in a nice comfy office and trying to plan things out. So we really are talking about having wide engagement here. And we need to look at the options that best fit the needs of the project and then undertake the cost modelling on the same. Most importantly, though, I think, throughout all of this process, we are going to be bringing a very structured and informed consultation process. So, you know, if you remember one thing today, please come and talk with us, because we don't want this to be a purely kind of academic research exercise. We do already have a short list of projects which has been pulled together by Robin Hirsch, who developed international railway benchmarking at Imperial College in London. And they're really designed to provide us with that very, very first step to look at a deep, consolidated review of cross-border infrastructure management. And we'll be pulling out, wherever possible, really hard metrics about cost, safety and quality, so we can actually get a real understanding of what's driving those different organisations. And this element of the work stream, what it will do is it will describe the mechanics of what we're doing, but it really doesn't give us the most important element of the study, which is what I want to talk about today, and that's about stakeholder engagement. So when I first came across the Rail Baltica project some 2 years ago, I was really struck by the ambition of the scheme And I was also struck by the challenges which existed. I mean, this is a genuinely complex landscape, and if we look at the political kind of complexities, I've never come across anything like it. It is a remarkable achievement that we've actually managed to get the agreement signed. It's a real mark of intent, and yet, let's be quite honest, there are still differences in the vision for the end organisation. So, you know, I think those differences at this stage of the process, provided that the debate is managed professionally, they are actually a real benefit. They should be seen as healthy for the organisation. So the management study will hopefully draw out the needs, the wants, and the dislikes of all the different stakeholders, whether they're just perceived or whether they're real. And it's hopefully these different elements that will help us bring up together the optimal organisation in conjunction with the benchmarking. And it is natural that at this stage, there will be significant tension in any scheme of this scale and nature. You know, all parties, all stakeholders have an obligation to deliver the very best value for their own investments. And in all the passion, it's very easy to lose sight of why people are trying to do the right thing. It really isn't counterproductive. And to be honest, we want to build on that passion and enthusiasm to deliver something that is a best-in-class railway. Now, why are we going through this kind of process in terms of stakeholder engagement? Well, we are about to commence work on one of the world's great infrastructure projects. You know, there's a €6 billion budget. This is more than a railway. At its heart, for sure, is 870 kilometres of new railway investment. It must operate safely, it must operate cost efficiently, and it must deliver those obligations and expectations that sit at the heart of any infrastructure company, which are both system operator and technical authority. But we mustn't lose sight at any stage of why we're doing this. You know, what is produced as part of the infrastructure management study can't be an abstract academic exercise. And within the framework and kind of boundaries that are provided by the fourth railway package, we have to make sure that whatever comes out supports local needs and aspirations as best as possible. Now, those unique elements are really what relate to what falls out of infrastructure investment rather than just the railway itself. And, you know, we are building more than a railway here with Rail Baltica. I mean, this is a project whose success is all around the gross value add. So yes, on one level, Rail Baltica is simply a railway, and it's going to take people and goods from A to B. Now, the expectation on ATKINS is that through benchmarking, intelligent design, we will be able to come up with the design for an infrastructure management model which will reflect best-in-class design. It will cover cost, safety, quality, and environmental outlook, something that came across quite strongly today, I thought. But there is common recognition amongst all the parties already that the direct railway investment will promote growth, jobs, and competitiveness through targeted infrastructure investment that flows through to a European level. And yet in that context, we know again, and as we've heard today, each nation has a moral obligation to try and maximise its own return within the overall success of the scheme to derive the best benefits for its own citizens. Now, at first sight, this is going to intrinsically drive tension in the process, but the success of the overall project must remain paramount. And we mustn't lose sight of the fact that €6 billion investment can only be positive for the region as a whole. It's really easy to fall into the trap as we go through the next few years of seeing the development of the infrastructure management company as a competition for, and the overall procurement, as a competition for resources and direct investment in the region. And it's right that each country should take that approach to make its case with regards to what it wants to get out of an infrastructure management company over and above any direct obligations for the system operator and technical authority. You know, we're in a region with 38 political parties, 2.7 million very vocal citizens. We should expect this debate. And we are trying to optimise what is inherently an integrated system. Railways are these days. And that balance of efficiency and ownership is what will create success for Rail Baltica in the longer term. But we do need to come to an impartial consensus on what elements are essential for the railway's long-term success. So what's that mean? Well, the tender itself recognises that we've got to look for a life cycle cost approach over short-term capex, and that the outcome has to be maintainable, that it has to be financially sustainable and suitable for its future users. And from the outset, based on our experience, that does lend itself in some ways to certain centralized control. Things like timetabling, capacity management, and long-term planning functions typically sit in a centralized function for those kind of areas. They're all components of a system operation, and they're all central to kind of how rail companies work. But outside such items, answers are rarely black and white. So in the United Kingdom, for many years, we've had complete separation of the infrastructure operator, covering England, Scotland and Wales, and the train operators. But if I look back just a few years, what we've kind of seen in the United Kingdom has been the rise of devolution. So there have been quite a few political issues in the United Kingdom over recent years, as you might have noticed, one of which is increasing desire for local accountability. And as part of that, we've seen devolution. So in the railways, we've seen financial control and power and autonomy gradually being shifted to the routes, to regional rail businesses, still under Network Rail in the United Kingdom. It's something that has resulted in actually some real positives. It's had significant expansion of jobs in the regions, as the once monolithic central Network Rail has seen its power devolved. And that's all good. Other positives have come through. We've seen much better relationships working with the train operating companies. There have been some performance improvements, admittedly for complex reasons. But at the same time, we've also ended up with a massive cost escalation. The railway is now more unaffordable than it was before. There's more public subsidy being required. And we're also starting to see a quite dysfunctional relationship between what is still the central area of the business and the devolved areas. And there are some parallels here, but they are trade-offs. Nothing is quite black and white. It's a work in progress, but it does remain something that we need to think about how we structure things. But I would also like to leave you with a few last thoughts. So Rail Baltica is a great railway project. It's also a great infrastructure project. So it brings with it the potential for us to bring the best innovation in the world forward. Whether it's using the railway as way leaves for power lines, for grid connections, whether it's looking at using the fibre optic cable to provide additional capacity with lower latency east-west, whether it's using, as we are starting to look at in the UK, actually using the railway drainage systems to alleviate flood risk. There are all kinds of different things that can be done. And the platform for innovation that a railway brings today is massive. And so to close off, if you're a stakeholder in Rail Baltica, hopefully you're not just thinking about what you can achieve with an infrastructure management organisation, but also how we can think around the railway overall. Which we think about how we can do it better. Rail Baltica doesn't have to be an exact clone of what has come before in the benchmarking process. And I genuinely welcome your input and your opinion and your advice. So where we are today, don't forget that the railway is a technology platform. Don't forget that it can be used to create high-value jobs, and actually that these can be done with different flavours in different places and build on the strengths that a really cohesive and effective infrastructure management company can do. So thank you very much for your time. Don't forget your homework, which is to come and talk to me, and thank you.